Friends, Bison, country folk, welcome back. We're going to dive into the conclusion and Appendix A today. But first, LA's on fire. Let me put a timestamp. So it is June 10th. Because if without that time, LA could be on fire for other reasons, environmental or because they won a basketball game or something. But I've harshed on LA a lot for environmental reasons, for cultural reasons, for just like, yeah. And, I'm not going to say there's no merit in my criticisms. And what we're seeing right now is like, it's making me fall in love with LA. I've lived there. This cross-racial, cross-class solidarity where folks are getting up, linking arms. And yes, it has to do with immigration, the ICE deportation efforts there. Stephen Miller's pledge to arrest 3,000 folks a day, all that. But I choose to believe it's part of why you're here as well. It's like deep in everyone's heart is this knowing that our country is about something. It is not about deporting immigrants. If anything, it's the opposite of that. And we're getting to this place of like first principles. And I talked about it earlier in parts 1 and 2. When reality has moved so far away from what we say we're about, people essentially get what's called like creedal passion. And that's what we're seeing. That's part of what's happening in LA. People are fighting for the creed, or fighting for this country as an idea, a place where all can be created equal, where our political economy guarantees life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where we actually start to love one another as much as ourselves. In hearing what some of the folks on the street are saying, I'm hearing it. I'm inviting y'all to listen for that too. There's actually like something real here, not just, hey, hands off the people in our neighborhood who we love and respect and rely on. It's actually, no, wait, there's a bigger idea here at play, and we are not going to let this idea die. So that's kind of powerful. And by the time you get this, it might be later in June, maybe even July. But I'm preparing to be at the No Kings protest on the 14th, which is this Saturday. And my hope is that all of you have already made your plans and have already attended, because like I said, you'll be seeing this after it. This is a moment where we get to stand inside the idea together. So more will be revealed. I think I may have shared this here, definitely in other places, but growing up in the 80s, I was bored. Like, I thought the civil rights movement was over. I thought the 60s had passed. It was like post-Reagan, AIDS, like nothing cool was happening anymore. It was just a bunch of suburban replication. And that's not happening right now. So I kind of got my wish from the 80s, 90s. Like, I'm not bored. I'm paying attention. I'm engaged. My hope is that you all are too. You're not just reading or listening or watching this, that you're starting to activate and, join up with local groups and, starting to share your voice, your presence, your gifts with, I don't want to say resistance, because I don't know, just call it the struggle. So the last thing I want to share before we dive in here is that I started reading a book that I bought many months ago, but my colleague Atieno said, hey, you need to read this book. And it is blowing my mind, like in the same way that this in the way that like the 1619 Project book, like I felt black pride as a white guy. I'm feeling essentially female pride as, a male body. So this book is called Before War. Where is it? By Alicia Deva. And the subtitle is On Marriage Hierarchy and Our Matriarchal Origins. So it's telling the story, I think, better, or not better, but it's an important piece of the story that completes part of what we're talking about here. Like, I wish I read this book before I wrote Bison Medicine, because I would have included many of the sources in it, much of the wisdom. So in part 1, we talked about Wetiko and its birth as essentially when these northern folks came down and conquered the folks in the valleys. And these Wetiko bands, tribes, essentially started to rule, like stop raiding and started to rule. Well, what Alicia talks about here is there's a reason for that. Like, why did this happen? That essentially there's this massive climate event that happened about 5,000-6,000 years ago, something like that, where there's huge desertification from North Africa all the way to like northwest or northeast Russia. And so all these people, there's tons of people, because it was like a lush, verdant place where good farming, good hunting, all that kind of stuff. It basically dried out over the period of, let's say, 4 generations. So a bunch of people had experienced life much more scarce, like day by day by day by day by day. And that is essentially what created like Wetiko as a norm versus like this thing that we all have to deal with. And that's we bring to our depth work, our spiritual practice, our mentors, our gurus and shamans to work through. So that's where it moved from this part of the human experience to a cultural norm because of this climate event. Essentially created a bunch of cultures where it got really transactional, really patriarchal, really command and control, really power over, and they started raiding because they needed food, basically. And then they took over and started killing. And like that they talked about, like from a genealogical perspective, like none of the male bloodlines of like the indigenous Europeans persisted. Like they were all murdered in a period of, say, like 500 years. And so the indigenous female lines continued, but it was all the invading conquerors who impregnated the women. So there's like this massive like genocidal like holocaust of like Wetiko tribes, from the Russian steppe moving south into India and then west into Europe. And then of course that became Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the American Empire, like all like this Wetiko as a cultural norm went global after that. So Alicia did a great job of aggregating a lot of different work across disciplines. And I'm only in page 76. And so I'd say the other piece here, and this is, for me as a white male who's, had all the privileges, and now obviously we're seeing white men react because they perceive that they're losing them. I have 2 important messages for white men watching this. Life is much better under a matrilineal or matrifocal worldview because sex and romance are decoupled from your status, decoupled from economics and politics. So prior to this kind of Wetiko invasion, genocide, we all were living in matrilineal, matrifocal societies, and doesn't mean there wasn't partnership between men and women, but generally it was property, child rearing, all that happened centered around women and their homes, their farms, their land. And men, while we were part of the picture, obviously, the whole kind of husband-wife parenting thing wasn't a thing. It was more likely that you would, um, have girlfriends. Sometimes they'd be serial monogamous, sometimes they'd be polygamous. Sometimes you want to stay with them longer, but it's fairly, usually a fairly short interval. So that kind of runs up against this whole Hollywood romance thing, this, family unit thing. And it wasn't that there was a bunch of bastards running around, but that all the children were raised by the women and with the uncles. So your uncle was going to play more of a dad role for you, versus your biological father. So paternity wasn't that important. So, and she's telling all these great stories about how when, Wetiko state power has tried to do this with the remaining matrilineal, matrifocal things, that the men don't want it. They're like, no, you want me to have my own house where now all of a sudden I have to make sure all this stuff was happening when it was happening in community, and I was living in my female family's house. It was all we could share the load. And so men rejected it, because it makes no home economic sense. We are supposed to be villages, not kind of tiny isolated single family homes. And it makes no liberty, freedom, sexual sense either. I can go have a relationship with someone, and when we're both kind of done, we're done. And it's not they're talking about literally the absence of heartbreak. Oh, okay, it's done. All right, that was great. Thank you. It's because identity, its survival, and economics are not wrapped up in, to borrow yeah, I won't. I've got a lot of frat guy stuff that's still in there. We don't have to complicate our lives by attaching everything that's social, political, and economic to the genitals. That realm can exist. Matters of the heart, matters of the loins can exist independent of all the other structures, customs, rituals in society. So, men, as you're thinking about what's next as modernity, as capitalism falls, consider matrilineal, matrifocal. Read this book, and the ladies too, obviously. I kind of, I wish I was a woman reading this. I'd be like, yeah, because I am yeah, but and the other piece, not that this lets us off the hook from our inner work, but it shifts the narrative that once we get that this thing happened out of our control, this massive climate event, and turn us all into assholes. It wasn't just the men, right? I mean, we see it now, this whole lean in stuff. I mean, there's today, frequently, women are greater defenders of patriarchy than men are. But it lets us know the cause. It was not because there's anything wrong with men. Nothing bad about being a man or a boy. Nothing wrong with wanting to play football and hit and go on adventures. All that is great. But we have a lot of unaddressed family history, starting in that Russian steppe, that we got hard and mean and cold and manipulative and controlling and murderous and rapey and all this kind of stuff. We did that. All of us are descended from those guys who came off the Russian steppe. So yeah, I mean, basically all of Europe is that Indo-Aryan paternity. It's all the indigenous Spaniards, Portuguese, British, Druidic, Finnish, we're all those people. So that's our lineage. And we all recognize now, having read things like Dawn of Everything and Before War, and that it can be so much cooler than this BS that we've all been, given. So not that it lets us off the hook, but it's not because there's something morally wrong with us. We just have some deep work to do individually in our bloodlines. So with that, team, let's get into the conclusion. Again, thank you to Jared Brick House Media, for putting all this together. And thank you to the American Prairie for the good work they do in acquiring and protecting the habitat of the bison. So please consider reaching out to Jared for media, marketing strategy, video, and for to the American Prairie to include them in your annual giving. Conclusion. The kinship of the soul, this is a quote from Ken Burns, the kinship of the soul begins with your own, at times, withering self-examination. End quote. Many hearts make light work. Well, our task is great. If we all do our part by activating our purpose, nurturing belonging, and sharing this adventure with our local alumni, career, work, neighborhood, and spiritual groups, we will reach this mountaintop together. It will take time. We must be patient. As should be clear by now, this isn't a matter of one election cycle or even a generation. It's a bigger, deeper, longer, and far more important than any of us. As matters of the heart are a long game, matters of a nation are a lifetime. They're infinite. As we end this leg of our journey together, let us breathe in the invitation from the beginning. Feel this work as an invitation from love, to love, in the spirit of love, as love itself seeking to unfold in every imaginable way. In tender embrace, in the sweet sense that all is well, safe and joyful, that 40 houses in every direction. From you is the unfolding of love, a love enfleshed, a love in awe of nature's God, her wonders, her mysteries, her deep longing for you and all of life to become and express love fully in every form. Feel this from the deepest place, the one in your heart that yearns to be free, loved and supported, that yearns for everyone to be free, loved and supported. Feel this as a marriage proposal from this land, to love each other as much as we love ourselves, to stand in our dignity, agency, and nobility, as the bison do, as a keystone species who make life flourish for all. Feel this as a completing love, one with eyes wide upon the truth and wild upon our ideals and our potential, upon all that is beautiful and broken, on all that can be known, on all that demands blessing, curiosity, and care. With this feeling in our hearts and wisdom in our bones, let us reflect on our journey. After the softness of this invitation, we confronted a sharp provocation, where we had our lapels grabbed and we were thrust against the wall, where we were yelled at by me and begged to meet the question of this perilous moment. What if this polycrisis is a necessary catalyst for the United States and all of humanity to fully and finally know itself? What if this moment is ripe for a deep remembering of who we really are, who we were before every moment of our days were gobbled up by the grind? What if this is a call for a new national myth? What if our democracy, for it to work at all, on any level, it must work on all three levels: idea, political economy, and spiritual practice? So here I want to talk about the bison medicine symbol here, so you can see it on the front of the book. But there's also a let's see, where do I have it somewhere? Yeah, I do. No, lost my water bottle. Actually, no, here it is. Got it on my other Chromebook that died. So it says red, white, and blue bison. Blues and the red are from our flags, so the Old Glory blues and reds. And it has the 3 stripes on the bison's kind of torso, and then the 3 stars on the bison's kind of shoulders. And of course, it's encircled by a blue circle. So I want to share a little bit about this symbol. Symbols are important, obviously. We open the book with this young quote: sometimes a symbol can break, or an archetype can break into a human life and into the life of the nation, right? So my hope is that the bison is that archetype for us, or something better, or like it. I mean, I'm not attached. I just want to live in the world that we all know is true in our hearts. If the bison can get us there, which I believe it can, let it be that. So this symbol needs to do a bunch of things. It needs to be clear what it is. It needs to have layers of meaning in it. It needs to be attached to a greater myth, story. My hope is that, in part 1, and throughout parts 6, 7, 8, when we look at our purpose, that this bison and the moral teachings from part 4 are a part of that myth, that story of democracy, equality, liberty, being a endemically human thing, obviously a very American thing. At least that's what we want it to be. So this was my best effort at creating a symbol. Worked with an artist who's in New Zealand on the general form, and then I changed it a bunch. So to make it more bison-like and less kind of like cattle-like. And so the reason there's 3 stripes and 3 stars here are to highlight kind of the main things of what is in this book: the idea, the political economy, and the spiritual practice, or the 3 parts of our purpose: all created equal, life for the mere pursuit of happiness, equal pursuit. So the idea is, above all else, we believe and ensure that all are created equal. So they are created equal. So we're committing to that. And to do that, we create a political economy. That's the second piece, where we secure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all. We guarantee them. And that both of these are supported by a cultural, moral, spiritual practice of loving each other as much as ourselves. The deeper wisdom of e pluribus. So that's why the symbol has these 3 stars, 3 stripes, to represent the 3 levels of a democracy: idea, political economy, and spiritual practice. The 3 that are required for it to work, as the Haudenosaunee knew full well. And the circle, outside of just being probably the most common archetype on the planet, it's because it invokes the wholeness, the flourishing, the connection, the homecoming we will all experience when we activate our purpose in true community and allow bison medicine to heal, guide, and enliven us. So that's what that symbol is about. And the reason I'm talking about this now is that it's in the physical book, and that's where I put it, because I didn't want to have folks like earlier in the book think like, oh, it was like a cult or anything like that. But no, it's just a little memento, way to remember the journey that we've been on. So to answer these questions, we began tracing the contours of our family portrait, the shared adventure we've been on since we walked out of Africa. From Ubuntu to the Golden Rule, to Ahimsa, to En Lakek, Halaken, to Amagwanya, to Mitakuye-Oyasin, to the Kayanekwa. We follow the roots of our Constitution deep down into the human soul and the end story. We watched our path blocked at almost every turn by those who found democracy inconvenient to their personal gain. With eyes trained on truth, we met the enemy in the mirror, the Wetiko inside all of us. We witnessed our orphanages incentivize our worst behavior, exploit us, indoctrinate us into the false belief of superiority and inevitability. The orphanages implored us with every message and interaction to think of ourselves as solitary eagles who needed to deceive and rob each other in order to survive. Knowing that help isn't coming, knowing that we are deep behind enemy lines, we marched into the prairie of possibility in search of a future worthy of our souls. To guide us on our path, we invoked the symbol power and medicine of the Bison. We marinated upon its teachings, the 8 moral molecules of courage, care, inclusion, play, independence, generativity, protection, and redemption. We turned to them to lead us back to ourselves, each other, and our great national purpose. With Bison medicine in our hearts and the overwhelming scientific evidence in our hands, we explored what our purpose now means, what it must mean, and the actions it now summons us to take. We began with the central tenet of our ancient faith, all created equal. We paused and asked ourselves if we'd let it into our hearts and stand for it. Then we boldly crossed that threshold and wedded ourselves to each other. Congratulations. You may kiss the bride. I bet you didn't realize what you were doing in part 6. And I was like, unless you're willing to let this into your heart and have it settle on your bones, stop reading. So if you made it this far, you're married. Congratulations. I wouldn't book your honeymoon though. We still have a lot of homemaking to do, I'll put it that way. From here, our science revealed that our national purpose requires us to provide the conditions for all of us to become fully created adults. We learned we need 30 years of supportive rights, like R-I-T-E-S, and then rights, R-I-G-H-T-S, resources and relationships to become an adult. We learned that developing a sense of purpose and belonging plays a central role in realizing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We learned that without civic faith, the spiritual practice of loving each other as much as ourselves, our democracy dies. We completed our journey with a picture of success, our vision fulfilled, and a choice, another choice. And our choice is simple. We either surrender to the Wetiko and cower to the orphanages, intent upon the fall of our republic and the destruction of all of life on earth, or to follow the path of the Bison by activating our unique purpose, fulfilling our potential, and loving each other as much as ourselves in community with others. Our future is fulfilled when you fulfill your unique purpose, together in community. For yourself and on behalf of the nation, your task is to now take what you felt, learned, and experienced and move it into your life, into your career, into your relationships and neighborhood. Your task is to activate your purpose in true community, to co-create the world that you want to live in, right here, right now, where you live and work. I'll pause here for a second. I may have mentioned that in January, we launched a new men's circle in my community. It's before I was going out to Berkeley to go sit in a circle. And the reason we launched this in January was because one of my men's circle brothers in Berkeley, after the election, he's like, yeah, obviously he didn't vote for Trump. He's like, well, what can I do to create the world I want to live in right now? And he is our iGroup coordinator for the East Bay. And so I was like, I have all these people's names who want to be in a circle, who live near me and me as well. I want to live in a world where men are doing their work, where men love each other, where men take a stand and are leading from their hearts, who have repatriated all of their emotions, or who have living their mission, working with their Wetiko, with their shadow. And so His mission was to create that world for himself. I, of course, raised my hand. I'm like, let's do this. I'm in. So that's what there is for you to do. Like, once you activate your purpose, is to start doing it now, where you live. So the first step is to find people in your local alumni, career, work, neighborhood, and spiritual groups to join you. So, quick note, if you're one of the many Americans who don't feel a sense of belonging in a community, which is probably all of you, if you're hearing, reading, listening to this, check out Appendix F, and I'll get to that soon, for guidance on how to become enmeshed in a true community. So you need people you know, like, and trust to accompany you on the journey. People who also understand the power of purpose and are willing to confront the devastating and seemingly inescapable orphanages, who get the stakes of doing nothing and understand that purpose and belonging liberate and enliven every person and are critical for the survival and flourishing of our nation. As such, you are encouraged to share Bison Medicine, so this book project, with the members of your local alumni, career, work, neighborhood, or spiritual group, and begin a series of book club discussions together. As you recall, each part has 3 summary takeaways and 3 reflection questions to guide you in exploring your relationship to the material and really to develop deeper connections and talk about more authentic, true things. So in Appendix C, there's a guide on setting up your discussion series. And I'll pause here for a second. If you've been at a book club, this isn't like that. Similar, but it's not like that. And so definitely check out Appendix C, because there's a different approach that's required to authentically create a meaningful book club type experience. And a lot of this I borrowed from Charles Vogel and Priya Parker. So check out Appendix C. Additionally, you can kick off this experience by inviting me to deliver a keynote, an author chat, or a workshop like I just did in San Diego. I'm going to do next week in Mariposa. And frequently what happens at these events is people like, yeah, I want to do a book club. Who's with me? And so that's essentially, that could kick it off for you. So once your book discussion series is complete, the next step is, with that same group, to activate your purpose and nourish a sense of belonging in your community by beginning a group purpose journey together. I'll pause here for a second. Regardless of how you relate to the word purpose, you can always go deeper. You can always have you always kind of peel back the next layer of who you are, what you're meant to be doing. Some folks who've never done any inner work will get a lot out of that. Some folks who are very far in the journey will get a lot out of it. So regardless of what your sense of purpose is, you're going to get something from moving through a group purpose journey together with like 3 trusted peers. So I invite you to do a group program. Many of my colleagues and the Global Purpose Leaders offer group programs. Of course, I lead one as well. There's a group called, what are they called? Oh, the School for the Great Turning. And it's like affiliated with Rising Appalachia and Tending the Bones. And they offer what looks to be a great group purpose program too. But don't do it alone. Like, do it with people who you're already in connection with. Like, so folks from your neighborhood, folks from your workplace, folks from your church group or civic organization or, alumni group or community, whatever it is. Don't do it alone, because if, as we talked about, if you're the only person who's on fire with their purpose, Wetiko's coming for you. It'll either like eject you from your groups, or you'll capitulate back to the Wetiko norms of the group. So you're going to need other people to join you and link arms with. So you can reach out to any certified purpose or soul practitioner, such as one of my colleagues, or you can engage with the group Purpose and Belonging Journey, the one that I'll talk about in Appendix D, the Bison Medicine Path. You can check out at bisonmedicine.com. So once your small group has completed the journey, you can share your experience of doing this with others and invite them to participate. As we explored, once 25% of any group has a sense of purpose and belonging, it is only a matter of time until purpose and belonging become your culture's new normal. And a host of purposeful ways to heal, transform your culture will be revealed, workshopped, and implemented. Your purpose will guide you to take new actions, launch new projects, and relate to others differently. If your purpose allows, you can also co-lead the Bison medicine movement. So basically I'm saying, like, if you discover your purpose is like, we need more of this everywhere now, reach out to me. So you can also co-lead the movement and launch Bison-led initiatives. So I'll talk about this in Appendix A, some ideas. And so just send me a note at bisonmedicine.com if you want to discuss your idea. Now, regardless of what your purpose has in store for you, you will still need support and accountability. Your Wetiko will go along for the ride. Obviously, the orphanages are going to do everything they can to make sure you don't live your purpose. So the eagle will always be perched here on your shoulder. You'll need the support of people who love you enough to question your beliefs and behaviors, who know your purpose and stand for you to be the walking, talking, eating, breathing, loving embodiment of your purpose. Men's, women's, and all gender transformation circles are critical. Mentors are critical. Periodic deep dives into soul, trauma, and shadow work are critical. Spiritual practices are critical. And along the way, you can ask for help and support or share wins by sending a note to bisonmedicine.com. So I look forward to hearing about your work, celebrating you and your future wins. Let me pause here on the circle piece. So my experience sitting in men's circle is we all know each other's missions. Frequently, it's in like a Google sheet, kind of our organization piece. We know our shadow missions. And because we've sat in circle a bunch, we kind of have book on each other. Like I get where you're stuck because we've worked together on some of your work, and you get where I'm stuck. So that's what I'm talking about. You need people who are who love you for you, who don't want anything out of you other than for you to be the walking, talking, eating, breathing, loving embodiment of your purpose, and who can help you transform what's in the way. So the limiting beliefs, the unprocessed trauma, the unhealed trauma, all the Wetiko that is that you've taken in, ingested, and have it's served you for a while, kept you alive, got you here, but now it's time to get rid of it and replace it with more authentic, purpose-led, Bison-led beliefs and behaviors. So that's what happens in these men's, women's, all gendered circles. Because it is time to show ourselves, our children, and the world that our purpose is more than just words on a page. Our purpose is a practice, a lived reality, what President Lincoln decreed to be the last best hope of Earth. Let's demonstrate what is possible with a purpose as mighty as ours. We are a nation who from time to time does big things, adventures boldly, takes a big idea and runs with it, often doing what other nations can only dream of. And given the stakes, we know that now is such a time. When we are successful, and we will be, we will have fulfilled the great task of saving the nation. And as Lincoln prophesied, we shall have so saved it as to make and keep it forever worthy of saving. So that concludes the conclusion. I'll do the summary, and then we'll dive into the discussion prompts. So the first part of the summary is this book will have maximum impact on your life and the nation if discussed over time with 3 other people, if not more. The path to fulfilling our national purpose begins with you activating your purpose with others. Your purpose will guide you to launch and contribute to projects that simultaneously fulfill you and the purpose of the nation. And the discussion reflection prompts are: within which group will you choose to have a series of discussions about Bison medicine? What is your plan to discover and activate your purpose? And what support will you need to embody your purpose and transform your wounds and your limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors? All right. So Appendix A, I want to say a little bit about this here. My buddy Jed was like, I liked your book, but the real meat was in the appendices. And I completely disagree with that. Like, no, dude, the real meat is getting our story, getting how we're screwed. So story, part 1, getting how we're screwed, parts 2 and 3, seeing this new path forward by living our purpose, expressing the moral teachings of the Bison. And then, so we need this cultural, spiritual, moral transformation, to see ourselves inside a more inspiring story other than one of the declining empire. That's the main story that we're in right now. I'm like, that's the thing. And he's like, yeah, okay, maybe. But he's like, no, the real meat is in Appendix A and B. And why he believes that is that this is where we kind of get specific. Once we have enough people who are activated, here's some of the cool stuff we can do together. So that's why he said that. Yeah, I disagree, because what is on this page are just stuff I made up. I'm like, yeah, if, let's say we had 25% of Americans who knew their purpose and had true community, what could be possible now? But it is obviously not for me to say. I'm just a guy. I'm a citizen just like the rest of you. I just want this place and you all to have your best lives. And so everything I'm about to share is just stuff I made up. This is what we could do together. And of course it comes with my own biases and life story and lens on things and all that. So, Appendix A, future expressions of Bison medicine. So the first entity I want to share is, what if we had a Bison medicine community? So this would be a community that places the nation's purpose at its center and cultivates Bison medicine as a way of being. It remedies the lack of true purpose-centric communities, so a community defined by a shared purpose, a devotion to individual purpose activation and fulfillment, and a deliberate effort to nurture belonging connection. It inspires and connects people, provides them with tools to activate purpose and belonging in every area of their life, and develop the skill set to build true purpose-centric communities in your local area with your group. So this community, again, I'm kind of envisioning mostly online, gathers virtually twice a month to reflect, connect, and create. Twice a month is important because a monthly meeting makes it really hard to sustain connection, especially in an offline or an online place. And yet we'll have special gatherings throughout the year to mark key moments in the development of our nation's soul during our month-long civic season from June 19th to July 19th. So this is a whole month where we would be refreshing and renewing our vows. So think of it like that. It's like a vow renewal ceremony. Vow renewal ceremony for all 330 million of us. And it begins from Juneteenth to July 19th. So on Juneteenth, we have this very important day that's now a national holiday to celebrate when the last African Americans got the good news about abolition, or that the war was over and that they're now free. On June 25th, we have the Battle of Little Bighorn, a very important day for Native Americans. June 28th, we have the Stonewall Riot. July. And again, these aren't all happy times, right? These are just important anniversaries within this month. On July 2nd, we have the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the one that kind of drove Wetiko and racism underground and had us really start to exploit each other in a much more impactful and obscure and abstract way. That's really when we talk about the birthday of the orphanages was when we made racism illegal, because the orphanage is Oh, wow. Can't say the N-word anymore. How could we still oppress people? So many famous tapes from Lee Atwater to Nixon to Reagan talking about how to essentially defund the United States of America so that white people could have private universities, country clubs, schools, all that kind of stuff. So that's really when we like kind of turned up the heat, when we started to forget the solidarity, the Great War myth. So, fighting in World War II together, defeating Hitler. That's when we really said, okay, I'm done with that. Let's create a plantation. Let's create an apartheid. So that's July 2nd. Despite it being a good day for America's purpose on paper, it was kind of the beginning of the dark times of our lived purpose. There's a study, I don't think I included in this book, but it looked at the economic mobility and overall prosperity of Black folks. It was a lot higher before the Civil Rights Act. So now that you had the federal government saying you couldn't discriminate, that everything had to be, if there's federal dollars attached, it could not privilege one group or another. That's when life actually got worse for Black folks. Important day. And then July 4th, our Independence Day, and July 19th, the anniversary of the Seneca Falls Convention. Basically the start of the suffrage, women's rights movements. I mean, not start, but an important day. So I think I'm going to share, like, if we were to have this civic season, this online community, there would be 3 levels of participation. So 1, the Grays, which is just more or less subscribing to the monthly newsletter and being part of an online community to learn and discover information related to our nation's purpose. The Bison and best practices for purpose and belonging. Wallow would be the next kind of level up, where you would also have all this stuff from the Grays level, but you would get access to the group purpose discovery journey, so the Bison medicine path. And then the third is Bellow. So you got the Grays. It's like, I'm just kind of like consuming. Wallow's like, oh, I'm going to roll around in it. I'm going to activate my purpose and community. And the Bellow is like, all right, now I'm going to lead the herd. So this is a 2-year program that meets online twice a month and in person twice a year to activate purpose-driven leadership skills and purpose-driven organizational transformation. So again, none of this exists, but this is what could exist to accelerate this movement. So next entity, Certified Bison Corporation, CBC. So the CBC is a certification that granted to organizations that A, activate purpose and belonging for all employees, B, grant them at least 25% of ownership in board seats, and C, hold themselves accountable to practicing Bison medicine in their culture through purpose-driven career pathing and living wages, with their customers through their living wage sustainable supply chains, and in the communities and ecologies in which they depend. So it's similar to like a B Corp certification or a benefit corporation. This would take it a little bit more deeper and look at like kind of the culture. And so there's more equity between owner and labor. So it's like kind of privileges equality, privileges connection. So creating that love for each other. And then roots it in the business model. So sustainable living wage supply chains. Now, if we have this distinction, there are types of organizations that can accelerate that. So you need some kind of certifying body, similar to a B Corp. But then you could have Bison ethics or Bison medicine-led consulting firms and private equity firms. I know. But hear me out. So if we decided, or if it was legislated, which, we'll get to in Appendix B, if it was legislated that all organizations had to be CBCs, you would need a lot of support to get there. So consulting firms can help you think through, all right, well, here's how you would take on human dignity, seeing the people who work for you and who buy from you and who supply you as human beings that deserve a living wage and a healthy work environment. So how would you make that journey from where you're at right now, which is likely fairly Eagle with Tico, to a more Bison led enterprise? So consulting firms theoretically could get you there. They're folks with backgrounds in leadership development, organizational development, culture crafting, all that good stuff. And then because of the scientifically validated, proven benefits of being a purpose-led organization, increase of productivity, employee productivity of 175%, of tenure of 7.5 months, of innovation by 30%, that actually creates an increase in valuation. So some of the research that's on sciencepurpose.org suggests that doubles in 5 years, which is, those of you who might be familiar with private equity, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to double the valuation of an organization in 5 years. And usually it's through what Tico practices. So just trying to squeeze out efficiencies using AI to fire everybody, sell all the assets, lease them back at high rates, basically to hollow out, what do they call it in Goodfellas? Bust out, burn out. And they just try to destroy it and extract all this value so they can double their investment, whether that's through the value of the organization or what they're able to extract from it, which is, supremely Eagle behavior. So what if private equity firms were Bison led? What if they said, well, given that by increasing purpose and belonging, I get this massive return. There's some better up research that says that you get $20,000 per employee per year. For every employee that activates purpose and belonging, that's how much more they're adding to your organization. So what if we do the good, right thing, the moral, true, ethical thing, and we can still achieve private equity returns? So that's the hypothesis. So we can have private equity firms and consulting firms essentially transforming the economy, ripping through the economy, making them all Bison-led and improving everyone's life and the planet in the process. So the next entity, and this is something I'm kind of already doing, but this would be a little bit more serious. So I'm writing something every week called the Bison Medicine Dispatch. And so this future entity is called the Bison Union. So Bison Union is a Sunday periodical that explores current events through the lens of our nation's purpose and Bison medicine, exploring which current events promote, secure, and expand them, and which events desecrate them. And the editorial and opinion sections would follow similar guidelines. And they would be ad-supported by, exclusively by certified Bison-led corporations. So this is different than a normal newspaper, which is get multiple sources, give everyone the who, what, where, when, and how, and then leave the why to the opinion editorial. This is actually saying we are going to look at the world through the lens of Bison medicine. So yeah, you're still doing all the, journalism best practices, but what gets written on, or what determines what's a good story is, does it further or desecrate significantly our nation's purpose or the ethics of the Bison? And so that's like an editorial lens, kind of like how, what's his name, Bezos was talking about liberty in markets or something like that, as the editorial lens for the Washington Post. So that would be the purpose, the paper's reason for being is to just explore where our purpose, the 3 parts of our purpose and the 8 teachings of the Bison are present and growing, or being desecrated and diminished. So that's what would determine what you're actually looking at, like what gets headline, what gets, the next billing, and so forth. So it's a moral, ethical, deeply American way to like think about news. So another future entity, Bison or public Bison charter schools. So these would be schools that you would get a lottery number, to like be a part of. So these are public schools. So think like, K through 8, K through 16 type stuff. K through 12, sorry. Public Bison charter schools to leverage the best practices for learning, like the jigsaw method. So having kids like kind of peer learn together. Small class sizes, student directed learning, feature social emotional intelligence woven into like everything, the way of being, the culture, the whole kind of reason for being. Systems thinking, think about how things relate to one another. So institutions, culture, ideas, people, movements, events, all that, as well as to cultivate the purpose and belonging or beloved community among the students. So obviously, these are the purpose of a kid is to play and have fun, to learn how to do things and connect with one another and develop social emotional intelligence, basically. So there's not like a ton of like, why are you here on this earth, Billy? You're 6. It's not that, but it's like, reflecting on, where maybe you experienced care today and where care was withheld. So like, one of the teachings of the Bison, like where you saw courage today, where courage was withheld. So just getting kids to like reflect on these values, and a devotion to these democratic ideals. So like, what kind of experiments can we do around truth and equality and justice and liberty within the learning environment? So what I would recommend are books such as, again, these are all probably more high school level books, but I'm sure there's like some kind of graphic version of a lot of these that could be made available to younger kids. So documentary history of the United States, the 1619 Project, the People's History of the United States, and Indigenous People's History of the United States. These Truths, Forgotten Founders, Spiritual Democracy, Become America, The Dawn of Everything, Debt, The First 5,000 Years, Patchwork Nation, Natural Capitalism, Upswing, and Healing America's Narratives. And then there would be films such as What the Constitution Means to Me, Exterminate All the Brutes, The English, that's a series, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, Where to Invade Next, Lincoln, J. Edgar, Judas and the Black Messiah, Born on the 4th of July, Oppenheimer, 12 Years a Slave, Best of Enemies, 13th, Harriet, All the President's Men, Roots, Nomadland, 13 Days, Bowling for Columbine, Selma, and American Buffalo. And then field trips to, I'll pause here for a second. I think one of the things that will happen is that we will start to designate places as being significant to the development of the nation's soul or desecration. It'll be like a much more kind of soul, spiritual, forward lens. And there are national parks that are part of that, but there's also other places. So this is like a guess of like where, like what these field trips could be. So field trips to the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Yellowstone, and Zion, to Washington, D.C., and especially the African American History and Culture Museum, and the American Indian Museum, and the Natural History Museum. Trip to Minneapolis to the American Craft Museum. So pause here for a second. We make a lot of cool stuff here, and a lot of this stuff, like our crafts, have been forgotten over the last few generations. And what they've done at the American Craft Museum is preserve them. Like, wow, we're actually like really good at making stuff. Regular stuff like desks and chairs and bookshelves and beds and all that kind of stuff. Of course, like fabrics and pottery. And then to Detroit, to the Motown Museum, which is another very critical, important part of our nation's history, celebrating Black pain, Black joy, Black power. To Montgomery, Alabama. Let me pause here for a second. So first Birmingham for the Civil Rights Trail, and then Montgomery for both the Legacy Museum and I believe it's called like the Peace Monument, but it's the one that has these like metal things hanging down to represent all the lynchings that have happened in all the states. And then, there it is. Yeah, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery. And then in South Dakota to the Black Hills and the Crazy Horse Memorial. So these would be some of the things. You could also include, like I'm gonna go up in Rochester. There's some longhouses, like kind of where the Haudenosaunee had the origins of democracy. You could include, a baseball game at Fenway. You could include New Orleans, Glacier. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could be on this list. But the idea would be to like select a group of places for their significance to the American soul and story. So another entity. So this would be a charter community, so a Bison charter community. So these would be townships that would be established. So think of like a land grant type thing, where their purpose is to become an island of sanity, to recharter and practice, embody democratic and humanistic ideals at the town level. So I think like a planned community, but this is actually like, no, we're going to be a sustainable living community. So the idea, again, I'm just making stuff up here. Like, what if we had 30 families who are granted land and where they can create their township and collaborate for at least 3 years with a goal to become self-sustaining, like, farms and crafts and medicine and all that kind of and education, with the goals to optimize human potential, belonging, community, culture, and demonstrate that democracy and demonstrate the embodied felt sense of democracy in a very tangible kind of daily social woven way. So that would be a Bison charter community. So this is more of like, I don't know what you call this, social engineering, mean strategy. But like, what if we made this marriage proposal something that was more viral, that could take off and have people commit and ask their friends to commit to the purpose of the United States? So this is currently called the Bison Oath, but the Bison Oath is a pledge to center all created equal in your life, career, and community. It is a viral effort to proclaim to those in your life that equality is central to your identity and that you want to be held accountable to it. So here's the oath. I believe in and am wedded to all created equal. It's what President Lincoln called the central tenets of our ancient faith, what President Kennedy called our moral crisis, what President Reagan called our birthright and our heritage, and what President Obama called the most evident of truths, our God-given promise, and the star that guides. I will continually transform everything in my thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and surroundings that inhibit equality. I will continually take actions in my family, career, community, and civic life that ensure all people who call this place home have everything they need in the first 30 years of life to be fully created, to fulfill their potential, contribute their gifts, and be justly rewarded. By taking this vow, I make it known that I ask to be held accountable to living all created equal and encourage my fellow countryfolk to do so as well, in solidarity, and your name, your town and state, and your date. Then you can optionally enter your email to receive a badge to put somewhere on social media, or maybe it's one of those like profile filter type things. And the other optional piece is invite 5 friends to join you in taking the oath by throwing their email addresses in there. So this would be some kind of web fake thing. So that's Appendix A, folks. Thank you for joining us. Again, thank you, Jared Brick. Thank you to the American Prairie for their good work. And I'll see you again for the rest of our Archidices.